Meccano, nuts and bolts, part number 37, containing 24 items. World War II morphine tin, containing small parts. I don't think this is an original tin from Meccano. Hi and welcome back. This week's build is a beam engine and pit head gear from the 1937 Outfit 2 instructions. As always with my builds, I will show the mistakes that happen. In this case, I've changed cameras for the last couple of builds. With this, I'm having to learn battery life. I get a much better standard of filming, but against that, battery life is lower. What I need to do is set a timer that tells me when the battery is about to run out and recharge it. In many ways, it's almost a perfect example of what was discussed in this week's YouTube video, logistics. So in both cases, the end of the build is snipped off. I hadn't realised this before I'd edited the video together. Instead of refilming, I've opted to run with the build as it is and acknowledge the lesson and hopefully pass it on to others. The better quality of filming, I think, shows, as does the fact that I've learned a different encoding setting, which I'm now using. Vlogging is always a challenge, and there's so much to learn. All of it has to be learned on the go, unless you want to master the skill before you set off on the journey. That would have been the path my father would have taken. I'm opting for the learn it on the hoof method. So I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm also going to get videos out there. Otherwise, I would achieve nothing more than learn skills and spend money, but not create any content. I think it's important to remember that life is an event that happens. There is no practice runs. You get the choice to either live it or practice for living it, but you don't get both options. After all, we can't have our cake and eat it. And if you have cats or dogs, you might not get either of those options either. The advances of Great Britain in the 18th century are down largely to the work of two great minds. James Watt, a Scottish engineer who solved the problems with the steam engine, giving us the powerhouse that the nation needed to advance. And Jethro Tull. Mr. Tull's work was in some ways more vital. He revolutionised agriculture. Without him, there would have been no workforce for Mr. Watt's inventions to use. But behind this is a silent prop, a wall that helped build this nation: coal. From heating the nation to firing the furnaces of industry, coal and its byproducts were essential. Coal mining in the UK is documented as far back as the Stone and Bronze Age, with tools found with coal embedded in them, showing that mining was established long before the Roman invasion. Excavations of Roman settlements have shown evidence that they used coal in both early iron furnaces and to fire lime kilns, used in the construction process to make lime-based mortar. The Domesday Book, or the first audit of Great Britain in 1086, makes no reference to coal mining, but does reference both lead and iron mines. The early pits followed seams of coal that had surfaced through erosion, most commonly found on the coast or near rivers. The seam of coal would be followed as long as possible along the surface until it dived beneath ground. At that point, the first drift mines would have happened as the seam was dug out. The early drift mines seem to have got as far as 150 feet in depth. The Industrial Revolution fueled the need for coal and better working practices in the mining industry. By the middle of the 19th century, the UK's need for coal was insatiable. In fact, if we had fired industry just using wood, a common practice in parts of Europe, where the coal faces are less numerable, we would have needed 25 million acres of woodland. The total UK farmland available for planting is only 26 million acres. At its peak in the 1920s, the UK employed 1.2 million people in coal mining alone, which was 2.5% of the total UK population at the time. But coal mining was expensive and did not always return a profit for the money that was sunk into the digging of the pits. Reading a copy of the National Union for Mine Workers, Durham area, Changes in Wages, Durham Coal Trade, 1871 to 1953, you're faced with the stark facts that the industry was not making much money for its return. In 1922, the Durham coal face produced 35.2 million tonnes of coal. It sold for 16 shillings and 9 pence per tonne, for a production cost of 15 shillings and 5 pence. For those of you who don't know or understand old British money, there are 12 pennies to a shilling and 24 shillings to a pound. The profit per tonne is 1 shilling and 4 pence, or just 16 pence. Wages alone came to £17.1 million. Costs other than wages were another £10 million. With profits for the Durham coalface for the year making £2.3 million only, with outgoings of £27 million. 1923 is better, with 2 shillings 5 pence profit per tonne. But coal was a costly business, and one where profits could be thin on the ground. The two problems with going deep in mining is firstly air, and secondly water ingress. Air could be solved by digging a second shaft, which also allowed an escape route should the main shaft become blocked. By fitting a fan, air would be sucked down one shaft and vented from the second one. But water ingress was a more serious problem. The deeper you go, the more groundwater seeps into your workings. James Watt is heralded as the inventor of the steam engine, and it is a statement that is both correct and incorrect at the same time. Thomas Newcomb invented the first engine around 1700 with the purpose of pumping water out of mines in Cornwall. This in turn was developed from an earlier pump that was powered by a water wheel. Sir Newcomb's design was an atmospheric engine. The steam never entered the system as it would in later designs. The steam was introduced below the piston. As it cooled, it condensed and returned to water. It created a partial vacuum which would pull the piston down. Then steam would be reintroduced and the piston would be pushed up. The atmospheric pressure difference was the power behind the design and also led to the name given to it, the Newcomb atmospheric engine. This method of operation was inefficient and consumed vast amounts of fuel, but it laid the grounds for those who came afterwards. John Smeaton, the founder of civil engineering in this country, then took on the problems. But it was James Watt, the gifted Scottish engineer, who took the 50-year-old design that Sir Newcomb had invented and began to solve the problems. That gradually made it more efficient and gave Britain, and also the world, the powerhouse that it needed to move through the 19th century and into the 20th, with steam still as our main provider of power, until the invention of the internal combustion engine and our infatuation with steam was replaced with a lust for oil. This pithead gear is a lovely, simple model. That might not sound like much of a compliment these days, but it is very correct. It is the next step in the evolution to the more complex pithead gear models. The first model is the elevator that I built in episode 9. This model then builds on that and creates a new model. allowing the student to learn from a previous design. Meccano was about building on those successes to grow the mind and the confidence of a young child. And that's where the beauty of this model is. It is a simple advance on what you've already made. The two side strips would have been filled in with the new fiberboard strips. Copies of metal plates. The theory of these sheets was to cut down on the amount of metal. Not that the outfits dropped in price. The set 2 that these builds came from had increased from 5 shillings in 1937 to 6 shillings by 1939, bearing in mind that a miner of the period made around 7 shillings and 2 pence per week at flat rate. So nearly a week's wage before you had to pay rent, buy food, paid your life insurance, replaced clothes that had been worn out. At least your coal was free, a perk for working at the pit. Post-war, the set rose to £1, 4 shillings and 9 pence. Mind, wages had risen as well. By that time, the miners who relied on this technology were being paid around £6, 15 shillings a week. Mining has a legacy that lives long beyond the pit. Where I live in County Durham, there is a history of these coal mines. The countryside is shaped by that industry, from spoil heaps hidden beneath a blanket of plants and an arched roof of trees, to sudden dips in the ground where old bell pits have started to collapse inwards. Long abandoned wagonways still nestle, hidden behind hedges, with old maps the only reference to them, and the straight line they carve through the countryside, with their footpath signposts still showing their existence. Buildings long since collapsed, with the bare remains of the walls showing, crowned with wild dog rose and bramble. The railways that connected this industry, now seeing only foot and bicycle traffic, where once, not a century ago, steam engines ran, carrying the precious cargo of coal and ores to other places. And from time to time, streams and brooks cut their line through the landscape, bright yellow with sulphur and other chemical deposits, showing the heritage of industry that built small villages to support the men that delved so deep into the earth in the hills that surround my home. Some, never to see the light of day again, as they gasped their last breaths in the darkness, entombed forever after a collapse had deprived them of their last chance to see their loved ones, and share once again a pint of ale after a hard day's work. And, one by one, almost as lights going out as an advancing victorious army marches across a landscape, the pits closed. Some with a fight, some silently, and with that death, so too did the villagers die. With poverty strangling them, the logistics that supported the industry closed one by one. Those who could leave did, searching work elsewhere, hoping against hope that they would be safe, that this pit would not close. And even now, on the eve of the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike, a bloody year's war fought between miners and their communities and the police force of Great Britain, people remember. The term scab is still a curse on local families. And the hatred of the police for their violence committed by the police support units from the major cities met with the violence of the miners, and the blood ran and people died. And yet still, one by one, the pits closed, and picket lines moved to the next siege, and still the lights went out. But the history remains, there to be seen if you have the eyes to search, the wealth of the black gold, the beauty of the villages, the heritage that hangs still in village churches, as the silk on the banners fades slowly, and the plaques for those brave souls forever lost, buried deep in dark places of the world, bear local names of families that still live. And as I close this script, I thought I'd share some names with you. From the Black Hill Pit, a coal mine that was not far from my house, and one I never knew of. The shaft was sunk around 1860, and the pit was closed in 1910. Jerry Fout, 10th of November 1862, miner, killed by a fall of stone. He left a wife and 2 children. John Peacock, 24th of December 1874, aged 21, crushed to death by a large stone that fell. John Gibbon, 15th of June 1877, collier, killed when the pricker broke in a charge hole he had drilled and rammed with powder. Drilling another hole nearby, he loaded it with powder. The shot detonated, either when stemming it or igniting it. Both charges fired, each containing 7 pounds of powder. Joseph Fleming, 26th of September 1883, aged 33, hewer, killed by a fall of topstone between 2 slips. John Weers, 1st of November 1894, aged 32, hewer, working contrary to orders at a section of coal left in place to support a water table, was killed by a fall of ramblestone 6.5 inches thick. John Stoker, 12th of September 1894, aged 16, driver. Having been at work for 10 hours, he exited his set on the wrong side and was crushed between a tub and the wall. James Thompson, 4th of December 1894, aged 28, hewer, killed by a fall of stone between 2 slips. Francis Lumley, 26th of September 1895, aged 22, hewer, killed by a fall of stone having removed a prop. Thomas Pugsley, 15th of December 1898, aged 21, hewer, killed by a fall of stone. James Downey, 6th of August 1910, aged 51, hewer, killed by a fall of stone having removed props to allow for easier work. He was found crushed with a section of stone 8 feet by 4 feet, 8 inches thick. Each of these names, each of these men went to work doing one of the most dangerous jobs. And we need to remember, as we try to address the needs of our planet, these people that came before who worked so far down in such dangerous conditions.